Africa is facing a series of major challenges that are hurting its economies. With the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic still incomplete, new problems like Russia's invasion of Ukraine, high food and fuel prices, and growing debt are making things worse. The most recent setback is the increasing slowdown of the Chinese economy. Over the past 20 years, China has emerged as sub-Saharan Africa's biggest trading partner. Today, 1/5 of the region's goods are exported to China, with metals, minerals, and fuel making up around 60% of those exports. At the same time, China is the top source of imports for African countries, supplying manufactured goods and machinery. This strong trade relationship has seen African exports to China more than quadruple between 2000 and 2022. China has also become a key lender to African governments, mainly funding public infrastructure projects which have risen rapidly in the region. Consequently, her share of sub-Saharan Africa external public debt rose from less than 2% before 2005 to about 17% in 2021, making China the region's largest bilateral lender. However, the share of debt owed to China is relatively small, at just under 6% of the region's overall public debt, concentrated in 5 countries: Angola, Cameroon, Kenya, Nigeria, and Zambia. The majority of the region's public debt is domestic commercial borrowing. China's investment in sub-Saharan Africa has seen significant growth since 2006. However, when compared with investments from other parts of the world, the stock of Chinese investments is still relatively small, given its more recent accumulation, at about 4.4% in 2021. Nonetheless, evidence shows that these investments have had a positive impact on the economies of the recipient countries. After years of expansion, sub-Saharan Africa has witnessed a reduction of Chinese investment and lending. At the 2021 China-Africa Cooperation Forum, China announced its first cut in financial support to Africa, reducing it from $60 billion to $40 billion over 3 years. This reduction is largely due to a shift from direct infrastructure financing to more trade credit, influenced by China's changing political priorities and the increasing debt challenges in many African countries. More recently, at the third China-Africa Economic and Trade Expo in June 2023, the total value of signed projects was about $10 billion, which is 50% less than what was agreed upon at the 2019 event. The main reason for this shift is China's slowing economic growth. Factors such as a slowdown in the real estate sector, an aging population, and external challenges like trade tensions and the COVID-19 pandemic have all contributed to this deceleration. In the 2000s, China's economy grew at an annual rate of about 10%, which slowed to around 8% in the 2010s. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, growth has declined further, with projections showing an average annual growth of just 4% over the next 5 years. This slowdown matters a lot for Africa, given China is the continent's largest trade partner. Africa's exporters, with their undiversified export baskets, rely heavily on China, and any slowdown in China's economy can have a substantial negative impact on them. A 1 percentage point drop in China's growth rate could reduce average growth in the region by about 0.25 percentage points within a year. For oil exporters, such as Angola and Nigeria, the loss rises to more than 0.5 percentage points. While the risks are substantial, China's slowdown could also offer some unique opportunities for bold African leaders. For example, by focusing on resilience and structural reforms, African countries can develop alternative sources of growth through diversification and enhanced competitiveness. Building resilience will help cushion against the negative impacts from China's economic decline. One way to achieve this is by increasing regional trade integration, which would allow African nations to diversify their export destinations and import sources. The African Continental Free Trade Area holds great promise in this regard, but it requires significant efforts to reduce trade barriers. Successful implementation could boost intra-African trade by 53% and trade with the rest of the world by 15%, potentially raising the continent's per capita GDP by over 10% and lifting 30 to 50 million people out of extreme poverty. Strengthening policy frameworks will also help reduce macroeconomic vulnerabilities and external reliance. This includes efforts to boost domestic revenue mobilization, improve spending efficiency, and finding sustainable sources of funding for development. Economic diversification is key to forging trade relationships beyond China. The heavy reliance on China during its rapid growth period led some African countries to neglect other markets, leaving them vulnerable. This slowdown is a reminder for these nations to pursue a China plus one strategy in developing new markets for their exports. African countries can also work to build local processing capabilities and move up the value chain. This space opens new opportunities to develop critical minerals processing hubs. The accompanying investment in energy for such ventures could spur value addition in other sectors, including agriculture. Moreover, as the world shifts towards green energy, Africa can capitalize on renewable energy development. Reforms that create a favorable business environment will further drive growth and competitiveness. Also, prioritizing human capital development and improving access to quality education will help develop a skilled workforce and boost domestic productivity.